Hey everybody. All right, welcome to our webinar for today. I'm just going to pause here for a second while people start getting logged in and give a few notes, as I always do. So those of you again who are used to attending these classes, just bear with me for a minute here. Um, this is a webinar class, and so it's a little bit different than a Zoom meeting. We can't see you or hear you during this class. So if you have any questions, open up your Q&A box and you can type your questions there. We'll be taking questions periodically throughout the class. I'm also opening up the chat right now. If you have any problems during the class, you're welcome to send a chat as well. And as usual for PEGS classes, I'll work on sending out those plant names by chat during the class for people who want to take notes. And then we'll confirm the correct spelling and all of that following, and we'll send a handout after class. I can't always get the spelling correctly in those notes, but I try. We are recording today, so if for any reason you have to leave early or if you want to come back to this class later, you'll be able to access the recording tomorrow. We will send out an email with a link to that recording, the plant list, and our coupon, and you can also access that directly on our YouTube channel. Alrighty. For those of you who are not familiar with Peg has been an instructor with us for many years, and used to work on our Gardening Advisor television program. She works at our Fair Oaks store primarily. She does design and annuals. And I know now Christmas is coming up, so you do beautiful things with our Christmas greens. And I'm I feel like you just don't need much more introduction, Peg. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us for these classes, and I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Thank you very much. And it is an absolutely beautiful day. The temperatures are moderated. We've had some rain. There's some moisture in the ground, and there's many bulbs available right now. And so today we really are going to talk extensively about the different varieties of bulbs that are available to you. And in preparation for all of that, I'm always showing you some of the products that really work for me. Now, not all of you may have trouble getting up and down off your knees, but I can't get along without this wonderfully soft knee padded thing. So I definitely have to have one of those. I definitely have to put on my favorite pair of gloves, which are box gloves. Okay, wonderful. And I have to get my favorite trowel, which is made in America, and I'm pleased about that. It's a Wilcox, and the beauty of it is it has some leverage, and it's wonderful to plant bulbs because when I'm planting bulbs, I personally rarely use a bulb planter. I use, excuse me, I use a trowel, or I use a small lady's shovel to make my holes. And I usually add a small amount of organic thing each time I plant any plant. And I've got lots of products here to show you and talk about my absolute favorites. Okay. So I go to immediately leaf growth. If you have compost, it's pretty much the same thing. And 2 or 3 scoops of this as you're planting each of the bulbs is absolutely wonderful. Another absolutely great one is this Coast of Maine lobster compost. It has a lot of nutrients in it. So if I'm working in the ground planting, these are important things. And how you plant it is important, okay? I also like to fertilize when I'm planting. And one of the absolute best fertilizers on the market is produced by Astoma. It's all organic, it's slow release. And when you're planting your bulbs, it's now recommended that you plant them according to the proper depth and then put a little soil on top and then a good handful of bulb tone. I'm not a fan of blood meal, which we were told to use for so many years, because it doesn't have the extensive products that this one has. Now, again, from Espoma, I keep on hand at all times a bag of plantain. There's very little difference in the bulb tone and the plant tone. And so I will use either of them interchangeably, but getting that fertilizer into the ground is important. And yes, if you possibly can, when you're finished planting an area, it's good to water it in, okay? Because you'd be surprised how quickly those roots begin to grow. If you put a hyacinth in the ground right now, or particularly a daffodil, let's say those in the ground right now, and then you ripped it out of the pot in a couple of weeks, the roots are already beginning to grow. And so they do utilize this. Now, as far as fertilizing in the spring is concerned, that's important too for established plants. And the best possible time to fertilize those is when you begin to see the green coming up out of the soil. And if you scratch the either bulb tone or plant tone into the ground around those, then that will wash down into the soil and be that slow release fertilizer that that bulb utilizes while that foliage is green. Okay, so let's start with the slides, Danny. And the first one is my favorite beginner. Okay, because I've always been in love with bulbs of all kinds. And over the years, I think I've planted almost every one of them, certainly not every variety because they keep coming up with new ones. And I have very little space to plant anything new in these days after many years of planting in my garden and being in the same garden for so many years. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, there are a lot of bulbs that we used to call minor. They are anything but minor, okay? They are small and they are very effective. One thing is that it's early spring when they begin, and we're so delighted to see the happiness of these blossoms. What we don't particularly like is that we have to let that foliage mature, have to let it turn yellow, okay? Because that is what makes the bulb for the following year. So don't braid it, don't cut it off, or you will not have as good a showing next year. Now, this is not so tough with these minor bulbs because their foliage isn't as large and it isn't as difficult to camouflage. But what we don't like is the larger bulbs, particularly the daffodils, because that foliage, the big daffodils, because that foliage hangs in there for quite a while and you don't want to cut it, okay? Don't want to, but I'm going to share with you some ideas as we go along today as to how you can camouflage that to some degree. So this isn't just bulbs, it's what do you plant them with and where do you plant them. Coming back to me for just a moment, Danny. We will have some other pictures as we go along, but an explanation for the what we call the minor bulbs, whether it's the Chionodoxa, the Hyacinthoides, and they're sometimes called other names, okay? The grape hyacinths here are wonderful, and they're somewhat bee resistant and sometimes very perennial. The species tulips, or botanical tulips, as they're sometimes called. I brought up, and I hope you can see the catalog that we buy from, okay? And there's a lot of different colors. They are very low to the ground, but very showy, and their foliage is not difficult to manage at all. And so I am a big fan of these botanical or species or what we call miniature bulbs, okay? Love them because most of them begin to bloom very early in the spring, so they're usually the first ones that come about, and not so difficult, as I say, to camouflage. Frequently, my use for those are underneath, the ones you saw earlier were underneath oak trees and crepe myrtle, and they don't have a whole lot of competition. They're in conjunction most of the time with Helleborus. Okay, Danny. Okay, there's the, now this is an absolute favorite. The Scylla. This one is called Scylla. And here is a fun thing about this. Now, I do it at wherever I can massively. And this is actually along a pathway, and it's at the edges of some boxwood and some azaleas. And in the next slide, I believe that, yes, a pathway. Pathways are important, especially in a larger garden, which mine is, okay? The only time I really use landscape fabric, putting it down, because I don't put it under mulch, that can be problematical, but I do put it down in pathways and staple it down with the sod clips, sod pins, and then put on top of that a very fine gravel. This one happens to be 3/8 inch Seminole chips. Now, the beauty of this is, and yes, weeds will fly into it, and you will have weeds to deal with every now and then, and it also will collect some soil. But what I have had this Scylla do is throw its seeds even over into that path, because it does seed itself about, not obnoxiously, but fun. And these stay in bloom for a good long time too. But they will often even seed into that pathway. And it looks beautiful. I love it, you know. Next one, honey. Okay, here is another small one, okay? And I really do enjoy this one. Is again one of those minor bulbs, Ascilla, and it's planted underneath the crepe myrtle. And they come back reliably every year, and they also will reseed some. Pushkinia is this one, Pushkinia, okay? And the next one, please. Okay, where do I plant these? There are many different types of tulips, and some are more perennial than others. Okay, we spoke to the species or botanical tulips that usually bloom very early in the spring and frequently perennialize at least for 4 or 5 years. I've had them do it very well, and the deer don't seem to bother those as much. Okay, but you can buy early tulips, mid-season tulips, and late tulips. So you can have tulips for a long period of time. And I enjoy these planted in this fashion because I have things around it that will camouflage. Now, having said that, it is fairly easy to camouflage tulip foliage because it doesn't last as long as the daffodils. So this is planted between perennials. There is a grass like Hacanacloa. There's a Brunera, which blooms in the spring, and it's like a blue flowered forget-me-not, and the foliage is beautiful. There are ferns coming there, there are hosta coming there, and this is multi-level. So I have some on the top level and some on the bottom level, and that's repetition. And repetition is a good thing wherever you can do it. Okay. Here we go. This is in front of and a companion planting. It's Pieris japonica. I love this plant. It is beginning to show its flower buds even now. And in the spring, the new growth is a beautiful reddish color. Then it has these beautiful flowers again in the springtime that last a long period of time. I'm very fond of Pieris japonica. I do not plant that in full sun. The card may say full sun, part shade, but I have found over the years that if it is in strong, hot afternoon sun, it is very susceptible to some insects, primarily red spider mite. And if it's dappled light in the afternoon or some off and on sun and has full morning sun or good part shade all day, this is a plant that will thrive there. And so that is a great backdrop for your bulbs, whether it be tulips or daffodils. Here is Caria japonica, and that is the background shrub here. It does lose most of its leaves in the wintertime, but the stems are green and therefore very attractive. And then it blooms these beautiful golden blossoms in the early spring and is complemented by the planting of the large daffodils on the front. Now, this particular daffodil is something of a mid-season one, and there's several different colors, and it's called a split corona. It's very attractive, and in earlier years, they seemed to feel that this one wasn't as lasting as others, but I have found it to be very reliable in coming back year after year. Danny's printed out my pictures so that I don't get lost in the shuffle here. Okay. I know what's coming up next, okay? So in the next picture, we again have complementary plantings. This is a mid-season tulip, and it's planted in front of, could be all the way around, the deciduous shrub, which is spirea. And this is an absolute favorite because it has the golden leaves that are there all season. And then you've got the other. Now, here's another one that is a great companion plant. Now we are going into a more shady situation. And we have a species tulip behind it. And this one perennializes and it even seeds itself about, which is just beautiful. It's planted with hosta, with tiarella. Tiarella is wonderful because it can be crossed with the coral bells, and all of that series are really good in part shade, not particularly in the hottest afternoon sun. This is not where I recommend those, and the hosta are better not to be in the hottest afternoon sun either. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Okay, here is another companion plant. Now we're talking about the miniature daffodils, and there are many of those, and some that bloom early, mid, and then late. So you can have them for a long period of time. Again, we're talking about a part shade situation. We're not talking about hottest afternoon sun, although they love dapple light for the afternoon. This is Phlox stolonifera, and it is a native plant. Phlox stolonifera, and similar to, but taller than, is Phlox divaricata. Okay, and this again is one of, and I can't even tell you which one because there's so many of them. This is one of the miniature daffodils planted among those. Now, here again is that species tulip, and I highly recommend it, okay? I think the ones that we have in stock right now downstairs are more pink flowered than this one, but I have those also, and they're beautiful. But this is showing you not just companion planting, but it's also color coordination, because this tulip is picking up the color that is in that heucherella. And this heucherella is that cross between the tiarella and the heuchera or coral bells, okay? Now, in front of that is a fern, and there are many different varieties of fern, and they all thrive in a part shade situation. Most of them don't like the long, hot afternoon sun. But these are plants that can help you camouflage and complement the bulbs that you're planting. And even in small spaces, this is a beautiful combination. So when you're selecting those bulbs, think in terms of color coordination. Okay, Dan. Here again, this is another variety of the miniature daffodil. And behind that, this is a border out in the garden. And much of this border gets full morning sun in which I can grow almost anything, get some shade in midday, and then get some afternoon sun. And so this Stolonifera phlox is behind it, and in front of it is a hardy perennial geranium, Geranium mycorrhizum, Geranium mycorrhizum. And it blooms beautifully in the spring also, is evergreen, deer resistant, and the daffodils, narcissus are all deer resistant. The tulips, not necessarily so, okay? But this is a border planting, and I do think if I go and use my photos here to remind me what's coming up next, I do feel the next slide, yes, shows that same border, yes. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Oh, that's not it. Okay, this is fine. We'll deal with this. This is actually a picture that you saw earlier from a different angle, which is good. You can see this is multi-level. Happens to be a patio outside the basement door, but it could also be that you have a landscape that needs to be tiered anyway. So this is a tiered situation. It's very attractive. So above it, you can see the hostas coming along. It's going to be there along with fern in that area to help hide that foliage. And you can see the ornamental grasses just coming. That is Hakanakloa, Hakanakloa, okay? And then at the base, and here again, you have a color pickup here, which is always fun. You've got the white tulips and you've got the white blossoms of the tiarella. Okay, David. All right, this is the picture that I was looking for. We were talking about the border, and you saw the very end of that border. And this is 1 year of what was there. A lot of tulips planted in it and a lot of perennials in between, plus some annuals to pick up color. There probably are further down that you can't see pansies that are doing a color pickup because they're beautiful. You plant them now, they go through the winter, not as bright and beautiful in the depth of winter, but then they revive as soon as the weather warms a little bit, and they bloom until heat takes them out through May usually, or you're ready to plant summer annuals. Okay. Now here is that border at another time where, as you see, I have a long row of different types of daffodils because I really do enjoy picking these, and the babies, my little great grandchildren now, love picking them and bringing them in and arranging them. And in front of that, I have planted additional pansies, okay? And then in the next picture, you can see when it's a little more established, those are in full bloom. The pansies are looking brighter. The azaleas are coming into bloom. This gets absolute full morning sun, some shade in the afternoon, but in the later afternoon, sun again. And it really does thrive in that situation. And this is also an area where over those bulbs, I plant some annuals that are very attractive to the birds, bees, and butterflies, particularly the hummingbirds. So you'll find in the summertime, particularly, a lot of salvia and some of the other even perennials that are very attractive to the birds, bees, and butterflies, okay? Okay, here is that same picture because I wanted you to see how it can evolve. Now the bulbs have finished and some of those other plants are coming on. There's Nepeta in the foreground that is beautiful. It will bloom beautifully. If you cut it back by a third, it will bloom again. And if you cut it back by a third, you can get 3 blooms out of it, and it is perennial. There are a few echinacea in there, which the birds certainly love. And I leave my last blooms up for the winter so that the birds can enjoy the seeds of those. And there are pansies, and there will be salvia and some other things as the season progresses. Okay, another pictures of using tulips in with perennials. In this case, mostly it's hosta fern and boxwood. Okay. Now, in the very next picture, this is a planting across the creek where I have very few other things planted. And so we massed bulbs in that area many, many years ago, and they are still thriving today. This planting was done originally over 20 years ago. And you can see in the background, there's cherry trees, there's dogwood coming, there's some holly. There are a lot of oak trees. This is primarily all beneath oaks. Now, people will say, plant these bulbs in full sun. I can't do that because I only have small areas that get full sun, or only maybe 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours of sun. But these get dappled light all day long. And these are deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves. And so all of these bulbs get sunshine when they need to be producing from the greens the bulb for the next year. This is the kind of area that you need to go in and sprinkle your plantain around in the springtime because they're established. Now, what I should do is go back there every 5 or 6 years and dig up clumps and separate them and plant them out so that I'd have lots of masses of them. I'm not going to tell you that I've always done that. It's the thing to do to really propagate them and maybe have the blooms be larger too. But I haven't done that in all cases, and they're still thriving. And so I highly recommend daffodils and narcissus. Now, daffodils are narcissus. Narcissus are not daffodils, okay? So there's a difference in their appearance. The daffodils usually have short, split corona or large trumpets, and the narcissus are quite different, okay? Now, what is my now, deer resistant too. They don't eat the foliage and they don't eat the blossoms, okay? What is my absolutely favorite deer resistant perennial to plant with these things? Helleborus, okay? I have planted Helleborus for many, many years, and they reproduce rapidly, okay? And rather than pull all of those up, I just let them go. And so it really cuts maintenance for me because when they're massed this heavily, very few weeds grow among them. So I don't have a weeding problem. Actually, in shade, part shade, one doesn't have as many weeds as you do in full sun. So it's lower maintenance too. There are enough evergreens in this area, there's over 2 acres involved here, and this is what I call my across the creek beds, which I don't maintain heavily and don't have to. But I absolutely love Helleborus. These are the old-fashioned varieties because they're very promiscuous. They throw their seeds everywhere, and I don't worry about it, okay? Because I haven't met a Helleborus that I didn't love. There are some new varieties on the market today that are very double and absolutely magnificent. I like some ornamentation, right, ornamentation in the garden. I don't want to overdo it, but I made some hyperduper balls in past years, and I like to have something that complements the landscape as you walk through it. It makes it kind of interesting, you know, okay? Here is another complementary situation. And these are the larger, what we think of as snowdrops. They are leucojum. Leucojum, leucojum, okay? And they are planted with one of the varieties of euphorbia. And this is the blossom that lasts for a very long time. And it becomes something of a ground cover if you've got the space. Otherwise, you pull up what you don't need. You know, it's not that difficult to maintain. So that's a complementary thing. And this can be sun or shade, okay? I do love the euphorbias. Now, you want to be sure you wear your gloves with this because some people are allergic to the sap of this plant. So you don't necessarily want to get that on your skin. It doesn't seem to bother me, but I always wear gloves anyway. I mean, yes, I like to feel the earth, but my hands don't want to feel the earth that much. So I like gloves on my hands, okay? Next one, please. Okay, here is a wonderful little plant that blooms in the early spring. And it is beautiful with all of those small tulips or all of those species ones. And with the miniature daffodils, I do enjoy all of those planted in spaces together. This is an anemone. And let's come back to me for a minute and talk about it. Okay. This is the white one. Okay. It's a spring flowered anemone, okay? It's anemone blanda, Blanda. This bulb, if I open this up, which I need to show you, okay? It looks very, very dried up, and it is, okay? Let me show you what it looks like. And I wish that I had also put some of this in some water to show you the difference. Okay, can you see how really dried up that looks? What you need to do before you plant these bulbs is put them in a cup of water. It can be slightly warm to start with, and let them soak overnight. They will enlarge 3 or 4 times the size of what they are right now, and they will go in and settle in and begin to set down some roots very quickly. Yes, you can plant them like this and then water them well too, but I really do recommend soaking these bulbs. And they're white and they're purple, and I think there's some pink ones also. And they really form something of a little bit of a ground cover. And as I said, they're absolutely beautiful with these species tulips like these. They're wonderful, or even with all of these. Chionodoxa. Okay. Now, there are many, many types, and they're small, of the grape hyacinths. This is a fairly new variety. I plant a lot of the strong, the original ones. I like to have a few of these just for accent pieces, but these are all the plants that really, really work well together. Now, I don't know that this particular variety has, usually you'll see things that say deer resistant. The blossoms are deer resistant, but if you plant the grape hyacinths, and I love them, and they're wonderful border plants. You can do a mass at the border, and you won't mind the foliage because it's pretty attractive for a long period of time. And when it goes down, it doesn't last very long. So it makes a great border plant. And the blossoms last for a long time also. But the deer will eat the foliage when it comes up in the fall, and it is normal that this foliage come up in the fall, okay? And the deer will eat the foliage. And we'll talk a little bit before we go away today about what can you do about the deer and still have these favorite things. I don't know that I have, if I do, I'll repeat myself while we're here. Here is another, and it's in the allium family. I've called it Nectaroscortum for years. That's a mouthful. Nectaroscordum. Nectaroscortum. If you've never planted this bulb, you should plant it now because it's so interesting. Blooms mid to a little late mid-season, and it's absolutely spectacular. I don't think I included a picture in this, but I do have it extensively in my garden. And it, as I said, it's supposedly in the allium family, and I'm very fond of allium. Okay, alrighty, let's go to the next one. Excuse me. Okay, I do a lot of bulbs in containers. One beautiful thing is that containers are mobile. Now, wintering containers with bulbs in them, over. I primarily have larger containers. Almost all of them, with some exceptions, when I have an accent plant that's easy to water. Most of them are at least 12 inches, but most are 18 inches wide and as deep, okay? And they are fine out there. I will plant a lot of times just one bulb in a container, one type of bulb, or a combination of bulbs. Or I will plant the bulbs and then put this wonderful annuals in it, okay? Like I will show you in a, let's come back to it right now, actually, while I'm here, because it's important. I will plant those bulbs and then add something on top of them. And they'll come through in the spring and bloom. And I don't worry about protecting them. Absolute favorites in that are the kale. The cabbage aren't as hardy. I know they're beautiful, and a lot of people use them, and we have them. But my preference is the kale because it always goes through the winter. And then this will get pretty tall and send up a tall spray of blossoms that's absolutely beautiful and lasts for at least 3 weeks in their golden yellow, okay? Complements whatever it's planted with. So this is the dinosaur kale. And then we have the red boar kale. Totally beautiful. And it will get taller than this. Now, if you purchase these, here is what you should do. You should remove the bottom leaves, okay, and plant it as deeply as you can because it will grow roots from all of that. This is true of tomatoes in the summertime, but this is true of this right now. So you can really plant this deeply in the pot and plant the bulbs around it, not under it, but around it, okay? And then you'll get that spray of golden flowers in the spring. And then you're done. You take it out and you put your summer annuals in, okay? Now, I think those are my favorites. 2 of my favorites, but there are a lot of others, okay? Now, while we're here, though, let's talk for a minute about combinations. I was very pleased to see, and we have a number of companies that produce these color blends or complementary colors, or you can absolutely do your own of that nature. But I discovered that this year particularly, we have some put out by proven winners that are color combinations. This is a tulip with a narcissus, and they do complement each other. Now, if you think back to one of the slides that I showed, the coral bells or the heucherella, and the color combination of that planted in front of it or with it, it's pretty exciting, okay? So that's one with an orange tone. And then we have, oh, here's a fun thing. Here's one with a red tone that has a double tulip, and then the small narcissus with it. Wouldn't it be fun, although they wouldn't bloom at the same time, okay? But the crocus could be planted in a mass in front of it, would bloom first, and then these would come into bloom. So thinking always for color combinations. And I was very fond of this one. I like purples anyway, but isn't that a pretty one? That is a lovely tulip with a small cup daffodil. Now, there are enough bulbs in this. I'm not so much into in earlier years, they said, oh, layer a heavy bunch and then a little soil and layer another one and then layer another one. I'm more into some minor layering, but not heavily. And then being able to plant pansies or something on top of it, wherever, if you like that. But there are enough bulbs in here of these two plants, the tulips and then the daffodils, to plant a large container up. And wouldn't that be absolutely beautiful? I think so. Anyway, I'm gonna give that a try, okay? As I said, there are, look at this. This is the double one with a double daffodil. Okay, very pretty in that direction. Now let's see if there's any others up here that I need to share with you before we move on. I think that's it for that. So let's go to the next one. Okay, I did have a mass planting of the grape hyacinths. And remember, this is the one that I said the blossoms are deer resistant. They don't eat them. But it needs that foliage, okay? And the deer will munch on that foliage. And in the background, you can see, some people call it the windflower, but that is the anemone that I showed you earlier, and that I recommend that you soak overnight before planting. And then the next one, again, this is where I've planted so many of those species tulips and so many of those early blooming smaller bulbs, the Chiontodoxa, the grape hyacinths, a lot of different, and this is a little later when the foliage is maturing and is being hidden by Iconiclo other grasses or the ferns. Those happen to be Christmas ferns, and hosta all. And this is in underneath oak trees and other small trees. It only gets dappled light through the day in the summertime, and then it gets the winter to sun from the deciduous trees. Okay, so those are wonderful things. I am very fond of the heucherella and the tiarella, and the deer will munch that sometimes, but not often. Okay, so that's a plus too. And by the way, I've native sassafras growing in that area. Now, as a child, we had sassafras on the farm too, and we used to have sassafras tea. It's very fun and very unusual. Okay, let's go. I'm going to have to wrap up with some of these pretty quickly because I do want to leave some questions. Larger allium, Dutch iris. Next one. Larger allium with foxglove. Wonderful complementary colors. Next one. Okay, leucojum again, underneath dogwood, etc. The following, large cup daffodils. Okay, the next one, later blooming, small white, maybe thalia. Oh, I do have the Nectaroscortum. Isn't that absolutely beautiful? And it's been complemented. This is tall. This one grows maybe 2.5 feet tall. And it's complemented there by the variegated foliage of a forsythia. And the next one is a late blooming. Cheerfulness is one of them. late blooming narcissus that is very fragrant, and I love it. The next picture is a bicolor little small cup daffodil. Love it too. The next picture is very early blooming, probably Jetfire. Love the petals that are go backwards, and then the beautiful cup on this one, and it blooms very early. And in the next picture, we have the bulbs that are planted again in containers with the heucherella, the heuchera, the pansies, all showing up just beautifully. In the following picture, this is where I have planted daffodils and tulips in containers in conjunction with the plants that I winter over. And that is the kale that is sending up its blossoms in the springtime. It really is spectacular. And the following page, I have to have a few of the hyacinths because they're so incredibly fragrant. And then the next picture, planted in mass in the vegetable garden area because I love to have them as cut flowers. And in the following picture, cut flowers, okay? Absolutely beautiful because I've always enjoyed those. Next one, Danny. A nice mass planting of the hyacinthioides and with that native Stolonifera phlox. Next picture. Again, the heucherella and tiarella, both together. And you can see some foliage there that has not yet matured but will. In the following picture, again, containers. And in the next picture, this is how I do it. I put, okay, you've seen that picture, so come back to me for a second, honey. I want to try to cover this quickly. Container. This happens to be plastic because it's easy for me to lift. It's wonderful too. I put a piece of landscape fabric in the bottom over the hose because you've got to have drainage. And we do cut 1 yard pieces from this landscape fabric so that you all who want to do this kind of thing can buy a smaller piece without having to buy a whole roll of it. Okay, so that goes in the bottom. A good potting soil goes in next, and probably a couple of inches. And then I'll set those bulbs in place. Maybe it's tulips, maybe it's a combination of. And if you notice, I've got them on the perimeter. And then I'll put maybe that kale with the big root ball in the center and some pansies around it. Now, when you're doing this, I always hold my potting soil down about 1 inch from the top. And there's good reasons for that. I do like to use a small stone like the Seminole chips or the River Jacks. It's 3/8 inch, so it's small stones, and about 1/2 inch on top of that, okay? So that the squirrels don't dig into it so much, because squirrels love fresh soil and they will do it. Now, I'm sorry that I'm not leaving much time for questions, but I do feel I have to tell you this. I love a really good potting soil, and Merrifield Garden Center makes a very good potting soil, and it's less expensive than what I'm going to show you because it doesn't have some of the ingredients that I absolutely love in this. I love Fox Farm Ocean Forest because of the additional materials that are in it. You will find that it's more expensive. Another good one is the Espoma. All the Espoma products are very good, and this has a lot of organic things in it, earthworm castings, feather meal, a lot of different things. The other one is a lot from the ocean, okay? Very good. Okay, if we go to the next picture, I think it will explain these a little bit better. That's where I planted up. Now, when I did a lot of these 1 year, I put, and you need a roll for this, I put the landscape fabric down in an out of the way place, put the landscape fabric down, planted my bulbs in all of these containers, which are close to 12 inches up across, maybe 10, and then masked them together, put the river jacks on top, and then I pulled that fabric over And if you come back to me for a minute, I stapled it down with, and you don't have to staple, you can, if you've got a board or something, you can put it down. But I stapled it down to keep the squirrels and the chipmunks and whatever out of it over winter. Now, you'd have to watch this and take that top part off probably in February because some of those bulbs will begin to sprout, okay? And that's fine. But I haven't had to do this for a while because we haven't had a severe winter. But if you had a severe winter, this is a good thing to do. Now, if you don't want all that number and you don't have a place where you can put these, but I do, you could always put your bulb containers up near the house or where it's safe if the weather is predicted to be really cold for a long period of time. Or you could cover them if they don't have pansies in them. And I don't worry about it if it's those larger containers. You could cover it with the landscape fabric, okay? And I will tell you this, and I'm going to go back to questions, okay? I keep frost blanket or frost cloth on hand all the time. We are in October now, and we never know exactly. We're supposed to be possible lower 40s, maybe into the 30s in some area at the latter part of the week. I don't think it's going to frost, but it could, or it could 2 weeks later from now. And if you want to get some of these annuals past that, because sometimes we'll get a light frost and then it won't frost again for 2 weeks, you can use this to wrap them with, and that helps get them through. Save it because you can use it next spring. Okay, I'm going to stop for now and we'll see if we can work in just a few questions anyway. And I apologize for not allowing more time.
Oh, you're good. All right, everybody. We have time for a few questions, so please feel free to send them in. Just a note, if you have plant clinic related questions, I'm probably going to refer you directly to our plant clinic for those. Peg can speak for me if, okay, yeah.
I speak to beauty, they speak to the beast.
All right, yeah, so that's a good way of wording it, Peg. So anybody who sent me those types of questions, please feel free to follow up. You can reply to the emails. I'll send you onto the plant clinic for those, or you can call the store. The first question, Peg, are you aware of whether Galanthus is deer resistant?
Galanthus. I'm trying to think because believe me, I have tests of this because I have so many deer. It is not fun, okay? Not fun. They have not eaten my Galanthus.
Okay, well, that's good.
Deer resistant.
All righty. Our next question is about grape hyacinth. Does that have a scent as opposed to the
Not
hyacinth?
a noticeable one. No, if you got right up to it, maybe. I guess I never have tried that. And I've grown
Okay.
it for so many years.
Well, it's definitely not as anything like hyacinth then if it's not
Oh,
something
no,
you
no.
would notice.
The regular hyacinths are the ones you don't have to get right up to.
I had two regular hyacinth in my house a couple of years ago, and it made my entire house scented like hyacinth, which it's a 1,300 square foot house, but it was the entire house.
Oh, yes.
All right, next question. Okay, you had a photo. I don't think you addressed allium, but there was a photo from your garden that had it looked like there might have been an allium peeking out. This is,
Oh, I needed to
I'm
address
assuming, do you plant allium?
alliums.
Yeah.
Alliums have got to be one of my favorites, okay?
Yeah.
They're absolutely beautiful. And there are several varieties, okay, of the larger ones down there. And they're not cheap, but they do last for a long period of time, for years, usually. And another thing that I want to say on these bulbs, with the tulips particularly, or even the alliums, plant them a little deeper than is recommended, and they seem to perennialize better that way.
Okay.
So I do recommend that you do that, and the alliums are not cheap, okay? But oh my gosh, there's nothing that replaces them.
Do you have any favorite ones that you tend to plant? Do you have any favorites? I know there's a lot of them.
There's so many that are so similar. I'm not going to say that I have a favorite.
Gotcha.
Globe Master is possibly the biggest. And then stepping down, to the lower growing ones. Christophi is a fun one. No, no, you just have to grow them all. They're
Have
beautiful.
a grow them all. Okay, next question. Let's have a look here. I was interested in planting bulbs in the ground, in garden beds in front of their house. Can you go over any different, is there any difference in how you would plant in the ground versus in a container, or is it the same method?
Well, it wouldn't be the same method necessarily because you're planting in potting soil, and in the ground you're planting in your ground, okay? I did mention, and let's say that you're using a shovel or my wonderful trowel, you look at your bulb and go by the depth recommended on the bulb. And as I said, I usually plant them just a little deeper. I'm trying to see. I don't quickly pick up, and I don't want to take too much time. Whatever it recommends the depth, and it's usually 3 times the size of the bulb, okay? So these tiny little bulbs would be planted 1.5 inches. I'd plant them at least 2 inches deep, if not deeper. And I usually try, if your soil is really good, you don't have to worry about it. But with everything I plant, I try to add some good soil additive, whether it's our topsoil or it's Leaf Grow or one of those products that I showed you earlier. A little bit mixed in, okay, and then the fertilizer.
Okay.
And if you're planting them in a foundation, please keep in mind when you're making that selection that if it's the large daffodils, you're going to have that foliage that you have to let it mature. So you want to have it in front of something in front of it, or you want to plant it around the edges of your shrubs. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Question. Can bulbs in pots winter in an uninsulated garage?
Yes. Yes, they can. You can do that. You have to be sure that they're not sopping wet, but they never go bone dry either because they are putting down their root systems there. Okay. So a garage is fine. They need to stay cold. You don't want them to be warm. All right. So you can do it in a garage, but every now and then add some water to it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys, we've got time for a couple more questions if you have any, but Peg, I'm going to ask you to address something that I hear from people a lot in emails. Can you talk a little bit about the window? What is the window for planting these bulbs? When is the ideal time? When is too late?
I'm so glad you asked me that question because I hear from very experienced gardeners, and I respect all of those because, we share our thoughts and our experiences with each other, and that's a wonderful thing. I have yet to have my tulips that I plant in October. I have yet to lose any blooms or problems. And if you have existing or you're planting and foliage of daffodils begins to come up, don't worry about it. And certainly don't mulch on top of it, additional mulch, because you're just warming the ground and encouraging more growth. I personally, in this area, have never lost bloom in 60 plus years of planting because I planted something in early October. Okay. So I say come in and buy your bulbs and go plant them, regardless of what they are. Because a lot of people will buy the bulbs, set them aside, thinking, okay, I'm going to do this in early November because somebody told me that's what I should do. No, you're going to forget. Or maybe it's really cold and unpleasant or rainy. Buy your bulbs and go home and plant them. Okay? If one blooms, I'll be very surprised. Okay.
That sounds good. Alrighty, well, we're right about at a time with 1 minute left. So just a couple quick reminders to you all. We will have an email going out tomorrow with the recording, a coupon, and our plant list. You can access that recording. Usually it's about 24 hours. Thank you. Usually it's about 24 hours before that recording goes up on the website, but and on our YouTube channel. But you can find us on YouTube. And please feel free to go visit the store and pick up your bulbs. I'm sure Peg will want to say a little bit more about that. So Peg, I'll let you give the final word and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, the final word is put these beautiful bulbs in. I wish this picture were larger. There's the one that was the large alliums with the foxglove. Okay, and we'd never be able to find it quickly enough going through. Okay, but they're wonderful. The bulbs are all wonderful. Okay, and they're an investment for the most part. As far as the tulips are concerned, the species tulips, the botanical tulips, the ones that bloom early, and the Darwins, which are a cross, and the Fostoriana and the Triumph are usually, especially if you plant them a little deeper than is recommended, they will usually last at least 3, possibly 4 years. Sometimes not, okay? But those are the ones that are most likely to hold up for you, okay?
All
And
right.
happy planting. It's great.
Thank you, Peg. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. And Peg, I will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Bye.